afternoon, everybody. Welcome to a new edition of EIPA in Conversation with. Today, we are going to cover the topic of the role of leadership in transition. We believe that after the pandemic, we all are very much concerned about how flexibility in the workplaces, how the new forms of work are going to be working, and what is the role of our leaders to make it work in a flexible and agile manner. So we have conveyed today a few experts to be talking about this, to be discussing, debating, and hopefully also available to talk about with you and to answer your questions. For that, please notice that you have the possibility to fill in your questions in the Q&A part or also to intervene in the chat, and we will be processing them and giving them to our experts. Well, we are going to cover several things today. We want to talk about what is the role of leaders in constructing, in building a meaningful working environment in the new times. How can leaders foster collaborative forms of work, and how can they empower employees? And if we want to strengthen these employees and create a resilient environment, ensuring their engagement and motivation, what are the key tips we could be given to those leaders? And finally, how can the common assessment framework, the total quality management tool created by the public sector and for the public sector, how could this tool help leaders to really achieve all these objectives? So we have with us, as in the first place, allow me to introduce Erika Landi. She's the Director for Human Resources Support and Social Services at the European Parliament. Since 2016, she has been responsible for occupational health services, prevention and protection at work, medical absence management, diversity and inclusion. So she is able and available today to give us a lot of insights on what are the works at the European Parliament to drive and to conquer all these objectives. Daniel Gerson is the second expert with us today. He leads at the OECD, the Public Employment Project and Management Project, with a mission to help governments to understand and shape the changing nature of work for the civil services. In this capacity, he oversees the collection of data and development of research, organizes events, and advises governments in civil service reform. And finally, we are hoping to have the third expert with us. She will join in a short while. Maria Asensio, who is a visiting associate professor from the Instituto Universitario de Lisboa and a principal researcher at the Institute of National Administration in Portugal. Allow me to start then first with the first question. What role do leaders play in the creation of meaningful working environment, and what is your personal experience with this? Erika, you will be the first to intervene. Thank you so much for having accepted our invitation, and yours is the floor.
Thank you too, Gracia. I'm really very, very happy to be here with you in this hour. And so I will talk from a, let's say, practitioner's point of view. Of course, you heard in the intro, I am a manager. So I'm someone from within such a public service organization. And I would like to give you a few comments, a few thoughts just about the kind of transition that I have been in with my institution, the European Parliament. And so just to start, if we talk about things like work transition, we can, first thing that comes to mind is digitalization. And I would say digitalization, it was a very, very small thing in the Parliament before the pandemic hit. We were doing very few things paperless and very few things digitally or online together. And so this all exploded, and the role of digital and virtual work for the EP became crucial with the pandemic. As you understand, the EP, European Parliament, as a legislator during the pandemic, it had to be in the forefront of what was happening all across Europe, and so we learned to digitalize all this, and so huge efforts were made in allowing the functioning of the parliament during a lockdown, for example, and having this whole big legislative machine go virtual and do its duty. And so this was a massive investment of our leadership, of course, and very well followed by all the services and the people. Then the other side was that, of course, while well-being and this type of things is sort of has been leading an ancillary life in the years preceding the pandemic, it all of a sudden it comes forefront. And so how important is it that people are well and that they can continue to deliver, and that they are in good shape, but also connected to the institution. They are able to see the goal, to see that they will go the extra mile for their institution, and that their institution trusts them to do this. And so this was a massive experience of change and a realization of the value of trust and of the quality of the people that live and work in the parliament. And so this has been a marking experience for everyone. And so the leadership has, of course, a lot of different opinions of what should have happened next. And so we wanted some stuff back that we had before. We wanted to be not virtual, but in presence. And we wanted the political work to unfold in presence. And so we have had this phase when people started coming back to work, that it wasn't sure at all where the hybrid workplace would develop to, but it was sure that leaders and staff, they wanted to harvest on this period where there had been such a great trust between everyone, and that we were together doing this huge job of pulling the parliament through the pandemic. So in the return to work, it was clear that this attention for well-being, it was high up the agenda, and it has remained there. This is very interesting. It sort of happened out of a situation, but now it's really something that the leadership endorses, and there's a clear focus on this. There's also a focus on inclusion and accommodating people flexibly so that they can be enabled to do their job. Then talking about our rules and procedures, we are very much a rule-based institution, but it was very clear, and clear for the leaders as well, that talking about legal approaches on how the workplace should be organized, that was not enough. The culture needed to change if we wanted to be successful in the hybrid work environment. And so we set out to do a big project on sustainable hybrid working, and we were achieving things. We were bringing people together. We had a high level of interest from the leadership, also from other institutions. And so we can say we have raised awareness about the importance of culture among the leaders of the institutions. And so from this, the other thing to understand, and so something that has been the topic of attention of the leadership, is that we are learning. We are in a evolving, changing environment. So we need to accept that we're not perfect. This is very difficult for the parliament culture. It's not maybe perfect first time around, but we can try again. And so these like cultural elements, they came out really, really clearly. So I would say we are working also across the organization, not from a centrally driven place, working on hybrid working policy and mastering the new workplace and the new forms of work. We are doing this from various centers and from various realities, and we are trying in that to converge to a common denominator and to say what could now work for the parliament, how should it look in the end, and what are the things we all found out in this track in these years that will constitute our new hybrid workplace. And so it's clear we talk about things like people-focused leadership, trust, digital competence. This is really sometimes really difficult because working with the tools is not yet everybody's cup of tea. And so the leaders, they need to be in there too. They cannot say, oh, I work digitally, but I asked my assistant to do this for me, because you need to be directly in the digital workplace to be effective. And so other elements we're discussing is flexibility, inclusion, and again, trust. So it's really a big process we're living through, that there's this trust building in the new reality going on. Second thing, I will be brief. I'm concluding really the importance of a corporate health management. How important is it that we have a coherent approach to protecting and promoting staff health? And so we are now in our directorate, we are center stage. We have this tool that can help build the resilience of the workforce and help build the resilience of the institution. I could say various things we're doing, but we are, for instance, I give one example. After the pandemic, we undertook to have a checkup for every staff member, every member of parliament, so that after the COVID, they got in check with their own state of health. And so this has been another huge effort that we did. And so we make this awareness growing, how important it is to protect and promote health and physical fitness. We do a lot about lifestyle, healthy lifestyle, and we want to project also the health promotion more foreground. So all this has required us now to redesign our physical workspaces. We were sort of starting before the pandemic, but now we realize when people actually work 60% from home, and some people do, we have like a gliding scale of how many days people work from home, but we cannot be the person at the desk behind the door with the phone and the picture on the desk. We need now to take courageous steps in redesigning the spaces. And so this is very, very difficult. And so it's not just for no reason that it comes in now. We are supported by the culture change that's already ongoing. We have better chances of redesigning the physical workspace when now the culture has already shifted. And so the managers, what should they do to keep on? They should keep enabling their people in all these changes. The real core word for me is not flexibility, because yes, that's one thing, but there is an overarching concept, which is the proximity. So really the manager can be close to their people and know what's going on and know how to help them to perform well. And so it's more this type of inverted roles, where the proximity is key, because then we can do the job together. The connectedness is also a big question. So how to create and maintain community. For us, we have comeback days. We have days where everybody's in the office and people enjoy that a lot. And so we're trying our way around this, and leaders across the parliament, they are trying and testing actually what works in terms of connectedness. And so they are really, let's say, also on this journey. And so it's important to say it's not the leaders who know something and we take the others along. It's really, I see them going on this journey and accepting that when the values are like flexibility, inclusion, trust, people-focused leadership, digital competence, they need to get in there too, and they need to adapt themselves and go through it and feel the change, rush by and step in and be part of it. So I would say I stop here. I hope it matches what you wanted to hear from me. I'm available to answer questions and step in later as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Erika. The main words have been the need for cultural change, flexibility, the inverted roles. So we are going really to discuss about that, and the word trust that has been shown several times. Let's move on. Thank you very much. Let's move on to the next presenter, Daniel. I believe that from your role in the OECD and the research that has been conducted on future of work in the public sector, you will be illustrating your experience and your knowledge from the OECD. So please, the floor is yours. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Gracia, for this invitation. And thank you, Beatrix, and the rest of the team at EIPA for organizing this discussion. So much of what Erica has said really resonates with what we have been observing in so many of the organizations that we work with and that we've worked closely with over the course of the past few years. I'll take us back even before the pandemic. We were doing some work on public service leadership with a number of leading countries, OECD members, who came together to share experiences on leadership, and we developed a series of case studies on how senior civil servants were addressing complex, difficult challenges. We looked at how they were collaborating across agencies to achieve government objectives in Finland. We looked at how they were working with societal partners to co-create better solutions in the Netherlands. We looked at how governments or senior civil servants were being more open and inclusive in the Canadian public service. We looked at the use of digital tools and innovation in France and in Ireland. And in all of these, we often came back to the same common features of what good leadership looked like back then. We established a number of core leadership capabilities. These were sort of the common themes, the common threads that came out of all of these case studies and all of the discussions around these case studies. And there were 4 of them that we identified. And they're really about relationships, right? Because that's really fundamentally what leadership is. The first we identified was about values-based leadership. So the ability to know your own values, to understand the values of your organization and how you're trying to achieve those, and to be able to impart those throughout your workforce. So that's, in a lot of ways, the relationship with oneself. The second one was open inclusion. So being able to be aware of the different voices and the different opinions and be able to bring those in to a decision-making process or to a discussion, and particularly to be aware of the voices that we might not regularly hear from. So knowing where those blind spots might be and reaching out to get those. A third one we called organizational stewardship. And this was really the role of a senior civil servant to build the organizations that they require, the organizations of the future in the public service. So there's a lot about building a workforce with the right skills and also the right attitudes, the right culture to be able to achieve the objectives set for it. And the fourth one was what we called networked collaboration. And so this is sort of that recognition that no single senior civil servant has the authority, the ability to achieve these complex goals, and that they need to actually see where they sit in a complex system and understand who are the other actors, not necessarily in a vertical hierarchical relationship, but in a partnership kind of relationship, and how to access those people and influence those people and work together with those people, collaborate with those people, etc. Of course, all of this, then there's the political aspect of it. And what we saw is that in the crisis, this pandemic, these 4 elements became even more accentuated and really, really important, so that leaders could, keep a focus on the values of their organization and the value that they're trying to produce in the world, be open and inclusive, and even more so than usual, be transparent with information. The organizational stewardship, I think, was a no-brainer, and that the organization's also transformed. And so there was a huge sort of stewardship challenge in that, particularly if you were the head of an organization that went to teleworking, or, had to continue working in person, but in very different conditions. And then, of course, networked collaboration was essential as well. Since the pandemic, we've actually been undertaking a really interesting project in collaboration with EIPA and KDZ and the CAF community, looking at the experience of CAF users during the crisis, and using the CAF framework as a way of trying to access and analyze this experience. And through that, we've developed, in collaboration with our partners, 11 case studies, new case studies on how these organizations fared And one of the main areas that we looked at in those case studies is leadership. And we actually just recently, a week ago, held a really interesting workshop that was hosted by our Viennese, our Austrian participants in Vienna, where a lot of these themes came up in various forms of discussion. And we already said it, but I think one of the key words that came up so much was trust, empowerment, and participation. And I found this really interesting, actually, because I think when we think about leadership, particularly in times of crisis, I think a lot of us agree, we know the literature, we know what we're supposed to say, that yes, good leadership is participative, good leadership is open and inclusive, and right. And then, different leaders kind of take that on to different levels of heart. But I think a lot of people still thought that, during a time of crisis, maybe that's when you need really strong top-down leadership, because it's chaos and things need to be clear and directive from the top. And actually, our discussions the other week really emphasized the opposite, that the organizations that seemed to do really well throughout this crisis were those that were able to delegate downwards to the lowest level of management, and that had leaders that really understood their organizations, that were very aware of the different aspects of the different work, but that did not take a kind of top-down authoritarian approach to leadership during the crisis. They did not try to micromanage. They really delegated to middle managers. And I think this is a really interesting point. If there's one point I want to make in this opening, it's that we need to revalorize the role of the middle manager. I think a lot of the time, middle management feels squeezed. They're like that crush between the workforce and the objectives of the senior leaders. And we've often sort of maligned them, right? Because there's been a lot of talk about trying to de-bureaucratize and create flatter organizations. But in fact, the middle management in all times is so essential, because they are the connection between the people at the top who have a certain kind of strategic vision, who may, let's face it, in a lot of public sector organizations, may be from quite old and come from previous generations. You have a workforce, which is often younger, might have a somewhat different approach or understanding of the world that they're living in. The middle manager should actually be the most powerful in all of this, because they're the bridge, they're the one that brings it all together. And in any kind of transformation, I think a lot of science has shown that in transformation, middle management is incredibly essential, because they are the ones that are able to actually make it work. And then same thing we heard and we saw happening during the crisis. So the ability for senior leaders to delegate in effective ways to middle managers and give them the responsibility to really transform the work in the way that it's needed to happen, I think we saw as an essential importance. So that sort of leads me to say, what does preparedness mean then for crises from a leadership perspective? Which leaders, were the most prepared, and I think we can say that those ones that had already developed a trusting relationship, right? It's too late if you have to build the trust once the crisis begins. So there needs to be pre-existing trust. And that's an interesting, we can unpack that perhaps in the rest of the later parts of the discussion, what that really means and looks like. It's the ones that have effective middle managers. So people who have probably invested in the management skills of their middle management group. And this is often perhaps a less important role in a lot of organizational frameworks. I think a lot of organizations still focus on those senior levels as people who need the leadership skills, and the middle management are kind of sometimes forgotten about, and they were good at their job, so we gave them a management role, and we'll see the sink or swim kind of mentality sometimes. So really investing in that middle management group, and of course the importance of networks, right? There was a great saying that came up a lot in our discussions. This wasn't mine, but it's that you can't trade business cards during a hurricane. So the idea is that if you already need to have your networks established before the crisis hits, otherwise, so you know who to call when in the heat of the moment, rather than trying to figure it out at that particular moment in time. So I think those were really came out as key elements, you know, the trust that already existed in the organization, the networks that were already established amongst leaders and amongst managers, and then the capabilities of those middle managers. So I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Daniel. Very clear tips and ideas for our upcoming discussions. And thank you for linking your presentation to the event last week on which there is this research ongoing with 11 cases about the impact of CAF, the importance of CAF, the Common Assessment Framework, in resilient organizations, and how the findings of these cases are helping to build up the main elements that we need as good leaderships and leaders. And this links with our next participant, Maria Asensio, that she has been working very heavily on the research conducted under the Portuguese presidency, CAF challenges to promote public sector capacity. These findings were presented in 2021 under the Portuguese presidency, and also contains important elements for the discussion we are having today. So thank you, Maria, for having accepted the invitation, and please, your introductory moment is now. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Gracia. Sorry for these small minutes. I arrived late because I had technical problems, but hopefully I could join. It was very interesting what Daniel talked already about the four main leadership aspects in any organization, such as the values of organization, the open inclusion, the role capacity to build a workforce, and also collaboration. It is interesting because when we have to talk about CAF, the Common Assessment Framework is this tool that it is essential. It's an essential quality management model that was developed some years ago, but that has evolved along these years, and it has become an effective tool for improving the organization's performance in the public sector. The idea behind the CAF is that it activates an assessment process through the different levels of the organization, public organization, at the central, regional, and local level. And it examines how public administration organizations should set up their organizational and management structures and review its performance to determine the current strengths and opportunities for improvement. And this is important because of what Daniel said before, because organizations need to have a tool to improve collaboration, to improve and identify which are the values of the organization, to identify which are the workers, different workers that should give, the organization should give a voice for this inclusion. And also this CAF tool can help to promote collaboration. So I think the CAF, even though it is like an old tool, but it is not old at all, as it has the capacity to promote the self-assessment tool to support the improvement of the organizations and facilitating the spread of specific management ideas. One of the things that we have learned from the CAF is that it helps the top and middle managers together with the employees to improve their organization by communicating with their many different stakeholders about the improvements that have been done positively. Those who are the leaders, they need to manage and they need to identify which is the most important things to improve. Another thing important to know about the CAF is that the essence of CAF is a holistic system that considers all the relationship within the system and the external environment, understanding that what is happening, it is important to take this information to improve all the parts of the organization. One of the questions after COVID, one of the questions that should be one of the questions is how to strengthen employees' resilience at work and how to ensure their engagement at the same time. And it is important because the CAF as a model is built on principles of excellence, which are embedded in processes that contribute to achieve the mission and the strategy of the organization. So it is important because the CAF tool will give the organization the tools to improve and to promote the excellence. And I would say that there is something important. It is important to have a strong leadership. I also understand that the middle managers have an important they have an important role here because they are the key to achieve excellence results in organizations. And but how to strengthen employees' resilience? I think that the response to this question depends on two things. One, it depends on the ability of leaders to deliver public services in a competent, effective, and efficient way. And also it depends on the relationship between the leaders and the rest of their employees. Even as they can be the middle managers or operational workers. And this is important because the capacity of the middle managers and top managers, it is important to promote an atmosphere of continual change. And I think this is the key. If the organization has the capacity to promote the continual change, the organizational assessment will provide a way to examine the critical functions and determine the best ways to engage employees in terms of knowledge and in terms of expertise. And they will combine this with the ability and desire to work collectively for the public good. So I would also finish saying that when there is an atmosphere of continual change, it is created an organizational culture that encourage high quality practices and enable and motivate people to achieve high performance levels. Gracias. We are not listening.
Sorry, you're right. Thank you very much. It is clear that the CAF provides this necessary framework to be able to work around these important points identified for the leaders to really achieve these aims. But we have already several questions in the chat that allow me to go through them in order, and then we can start the debate around those questions. The first one is, how important is the promotion of well-being in the workplace? Is this still a soft topic or perceived to be a soft topic? Perhaps this one would be for Erika, if you would like to take the floor.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the question. And so I already said in my introduction, well-being is from ancillary existence before the pandemic. It was more like a nice to have. It has moved to center stage. And so I would like to mention two possible things organizations can do and that we have done to promote a well-being. And why is it essential? First of all, we have started issuing the psychosocial risk assessment. So mapping the levels of well-being, the drivers of well-being and the issues across the workforce. And so the other thing is our attention to mental health. We have a cross-functional program about mental health promotion and care. And so we can see that this is in a time of constant change, as the previous speaker says, the permanent change. there is a need to build and foster the resilience of each individual as well as of the organization. And so we can think that by professionalizing a data-driven well-being policy, we can increase this resilience. We can help people feel better. We can do certain actions to improve the organizational conditions for well-being. And so we can say that in this time of transition, we see this is very, very essential for our people. And so this is the first driver, and also in a hybrid or more virtual work environment, the personnel function wants to know how people are. And so improving and working on the well-being is really become one of the core pieces of the new work environment.
Thank you, Erika. One question that is different but might be related in the Q&A just placed is how can leaders motivate employees that are close to their pension and are showing demotivation? I think this question links also very much to the things we have been talking about. So if any one of you would like to jump in and give some tips there. Maybe Erika?
Yes. I didn't want to be too fast, but of course we see this a lot. And so one of the things is that usually it's a skills issue. It's people in the last third of their career who have been unable to jump on the digital train, which has really going high speed. And so they can feel that this new workplace is not for them anymore. And so they start losing their connectivity and their normal, let's say, habits, and they start disconnecting in a way. And so this leads to a perceived underperformance, if you like. And so the other thing is, for example, for public sector people, usually come and work there for the values and for that it's a meaningful contribution. And so the intrinsic motivation of working in a public environment, it can vary, but for instance, for our organization is incredibly high. And so we did research on this and surveys, and so it sort of helps, but people can anyway need to be reminded of this and what's their place and what's their connection. And so we let them take on an expert role, for example, or we use mentoring, or we use different tools of HR that can help let's say people in that third of their career path stay connected and feel that they're valued. And so this type of things.
Exactly, I fully coincide. We are also doing at EIPA trainings on knowledge management, and it comes very often the question on how to keep with us those that are more or less phasing out, and how can this help to really transfer the knowledge and the expertise. And this is also a way of recognizing and motivating them. Indeed, very important. Thank you. There are also another question on how you are doing with the program on mental health, but I think we move now to the next questions, and we will come back to you later if there is time, because we have other questions that this one perhaps is very much for Daniel. There is a question if anyone is working on resilient organizations in general, besides working on individual staff members working on their resilience and as individuals, and the question of how much trust do we need in this hybrid world of work.
Thanks. Yeah, I think the project that we've both referred to now is exactly looking at this question of resilient organizations. And so there we're looking not only at the people, although what is an organization without its people? So we are looking a lot at the people, and given that this was a people-centered crisis, it was highly in the front and center of what resilience looked like in this case. Of course, that's not to say that the next crisis will be anything the same. And one of the interesting debates we've been having is whether organizations as a whole feel like the experience that they've had coming out of the pandemic has made them more resilient for future crises, whatever they might be. One of the common answers we get to that question is, well, if it's a pandemic, yes. But if it's a completely different crisis, like let's imagine it's a crisis that takes out all of our IT and digital systems. It's an interesting thought process because so much of the answer to resilience has been IT-based in this round of resilience. What would resilience look like if the next crisis is a cyber attack from who knows where that means that for weeks on end, we have no access to our computers? What if the next crisis is some kind of, solar flare that takes out all of the electric connections in the entire, I don't know, there's all sorts of various things that we can imagine. Would that actually end up creating a more resilient, did our experience in this create more resilience in there? And I think in some ways it depends on how we've developed. And I think if we go back to some of the key themes that I was talking about earlier, if you have an organization that is heavy on trust, where people feel empowered, where people are focused on the outcomes, then yes, I think the only answer is yes. You're ready for that. So it's a complicated question because resilience to what, and therefore you have so many different sort of organizational factors that might contribute to different kinds of resilience in different kinds of moments. In a hybrid scenario, I think we can all agree that trust is even more important. It was always important. Let's not say it's more important. Let's just say it is even more visibly important. Because I don't want to actually say that it's less important in any other situation. But we heard, one of the big narratives that we heard from most of our stakeholding countries is that when they had to move to online working, managers had to learn to trust their employees if they didn't do it already, because they couldn't monitor their day-to-day activity the same way they used to. Now there's an interesting question as to whether that trust remains or not. And some of our stakeholders were talking about the introduction, for example, of these different online monitoring systems where you can track every movement of your employee and to know when they're at their desk and when they're not, know how many keys they're typing per minute or not, et cetera, et cetera. And I think this is a surefire way to reduce trust in your organization, particularly if it's implemented in ways that are very mistrustful to begin with. There may be some ways that these kinds of systems can be used once in a while where needed, but I really think that the spirit of their introduction sounds like it's coming from a place of mistrust, and therefore I don't see how they can actually help to increase trust. That said, I don't know if everybody had a chance to read this really interesting New York Times article on this phenomenon and as it was being applied in some firms in the United States. And one of the interesting debates about this that came out was that there were a number of women primarily who were saying that they welcomed this kind of measurement in their workplace because they felt like it kind of evened the playing field finally, that the people who now were getting noticed were the ones who were actually at their desk doing real work more, rather than the ones who just talked loudly about all the work that they were doing, which tend to be more male type character traits. So there is an interesting sort of question that gets raised in that, if we're monitoring for these kinds of things, does it actually create more equality and opportunity to build real trust? So the jury's out on that one, but I thought it was a worthwhile point to emphasize.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. Very interesting. I haven't read that article, but maybe you can give the details in the chat, and then I'm sure I will read it. And also interesting this gender issue that you have mentioned. Indeed, we also see some experience on this building of trust in this new era. And in fact, there is one of the member states that has decided that for those organizations that are going to continue on telework, mainly on telework, they will have to follow one quality management system, and they are favoring the CAF. Why? Because the trust is built internally through the self-assessment of the organization and going through all the criteria and sub-criteria of the tool. So indeed, again, another interesting tip on how to build and develop further the trust. There is one question here that I would say is general for everybody. How do we prepare leaders to the best to shape the future of work? So what type of mechanisms, tools, trainings do we need to give to leaders to really be ready for these new forms of work? Any one of you that would like to jump in, please. We have 10 more minutes to go, so the floor is yours.
Maybe I can just say something. Last year, I was preparing the case study of a Portuguese school that applied CAF, and this school was in the interior of the country. And I was surprised by the way the CAF team had effective mechanisms and internal dynamics for articulation and communication. So I think this is key when we are talking about leadership. It is important to identify which are the mechanisms, the links within this school that allowed closer relations between the CAF team, the teachers, the technicians, the operational assistants. So I think that this is crucial for not only for teachers, but also for other professionals, to have the capacity to promote collaboration, talk as they would say, provide a common language for talking about the organization and how it can be improved, and provide a way to engage employees from all different areas and all different levels to improve the organization. I think leadership should have this, or leaders should have this capacity to talk not only to the top leaders or middle managers, but also to promote mechanisms to facilitate the communication of all the employees in an organization.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Maria. Any other one would like to add something to that? Also, please consider this last question that is bringing us back to the focus on the employees and how do we ensure their engagement, but also, again, there is a question coming back to the problem of mental health, and there is this request from one of our participants to have a little bit of more detailed explanation of the Parliament program for mental health. So maybe linking it to what we have been talking, if you could take the floor, Rika.
Yes, thank you. So we started in 2018 and we had two objectives at the time. It was to raise awareness about the topic of mental health among the workforce and the leaders, and also to combat stigma. And so we were very much in awareness raising, communication, event organizing, and so gauging this organizational dialogue on mental health. Then when the pandemic came, we made a roadmap with concrete support measures from psychology assistance or group events, or we did a number of helplines for staff or managers, and so we were enriching our usual support offer for the pandemic. And then when it ended, we realized, or ended, yes, we can sort of say it looks like it's ending now. Anyway, we were making it more strategic. So we built it in more to HR. We now have different discussions, for example, for onboarding or for the political environment, or we link it to inclusion and diversity. And so we're now looking more at the value of mental health prevention, care, awareness, also in other HR policy areas. And so with this, we are looking at a prevention area, and we're looking at the care area. So we have action plans for prevention, action plans for care. And so what I mentioned earlier about the psychosocial risk assessment, this is one of the elements in the field of prevention, of course, for example, or like webinars or nice, pleasant seminars for people to tune in over lunch and discuss some topics. So this type of things are also in the prevention box.
Thank you, Erika. Just to close our conversation today, I would invite the three participants in this roundtable to summarize an advice. If you would have to say to any organization the main message for preparing the leaders, also the middle managers, for the new times, for the new types of work, and to ensure that there will be trust in the organization, how would you strengthen this performance of the leaders? What would be your, let's say, short advice? And we have a few minutes for that. So please, let's start in reverse order. First, Maria, then Daniel, and we end up with Erika. Just a few words. Thank you very much.
A few words. I think it is important to involve people and to value the work of employees, to demonstrate a shared goal to pursue excellence from all parts of the organization.
Thank you. Daniel?
I would add to that, making sure that you're investing and really identifying and investing in the kind of management and leadership that you want. So a lot of organizations still assume that it's just going to happen. They appoint people, they let them figure it out. There needs to be a real recognition that management is a job, that it has its own skill sets. And by doing that, you start to build trust, making sure that managers have a lot of opportunity to learn from each other, to get to know each other, because that helps to build trust. Knowing who your other managers are, having opportunities to interact with them also helps to build that network that is incredibly important to ensure resilience. So recognizing that all of this takes time, it takes some investment, it doesn't just happen on its own. Thank you very much, Daniel. Thank you. Erika?
Yes, I also thought about platforms, creating platforms for dialogue and frequent interaction, because most people, they have sort of a vision or a beginning of a vision, but they don't know if it's shared. And so the dialogue is really crucial. So if I should add anything, I would say it's a very tough times has been for the leaders. And so if we talk about mental health, which I try to really summarize to the bone, it's very important for managers also to realize that the care for themselves and for their own mental health is also anyway, in this time of constant change, it's anyway also essential to be able to be agile and to follow the train.
Okay, thank you very much to all of you. I think it has been a great discussion. I wish we would have more time, and we will revisit this topical area both in our courses and also in upcoming conversations. So I want to thank you all. I also want to thank my colleague Beatrix that has been helping us to convey this group of experts to all the audience for being with us. We really hope that you have got some useful message to take back to your own organizations. And please keep connected. We stay here to serve you, and we very much look forward to meeting you soon, all of you. And please, my big thanks to Erika, Maria, Daniel for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you too. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. Gracias.
Bye-bye.